Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Microsoft Office Addins community call for January 2021. Let's take a look at the agenda and our presenters for today. Today, we're going to talk about the new Microsoft 365 app submission documentation and experience. Michael Aldridge is joining us today to chat about that. Also joining us is Juan Balmori, who will be talking about Outlook event-based add-ins in Windows. And then we'll have some Q&A at the end. I'm David Chestnut, the host for the call. Before we get started, just quickly letting people know, please keep your microphones muted so that the presenters don't get interrupted. If you have questions as we go along, go ahead and type them into the chat, and we will answer those questions in the chat. If for some reason, there's a few questions we're unable to get to today, we have a blog summary that we post about the call a few days later, and we will address any unanswered questions there. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Michael, you want to take it away?
Well, thank you, David. Good morning and good evening, everyone. Excited to start the new year with our first call of 2021. I'm going to talk a little bit today. I'll be actually doing this with my partner in crime, Mairead, who's on the call as well. It's the evening her time. She's based in Dublin. We both work on the Microsoft 365 app validation program, and we'll talk a little bit about that, as well as how you can avoid some of the top 5 errors. Mairead, you want to introduce yourself there in Dublin?
Yeah, can do. Hi, everybody. As Michael said, I'm over in Dublin, Ireland, so just coming up on the end of my day. I'm part of the validation team, and I've been working in the team for about 8 years. So pretty much any question you guys want to ask about app validation, between myself and Michael, we will have you covered.
Absolutely. She's actually been doing this. She's like our institutional memory on all the right things and the wrong things to do related to app validation. Well, great. Well, listen, we wanted to really just start the new year by talking about some things that we actually launched probably a little bit quietly in the middle of December. And we've added a bunch of new resources, as well as there's a new slightly adjusted or updated experience for how you submit your apps. And it's really all designed around how to avoid some of the top 5 errors that we've been seeing over the last year, and help you to have a much smoother process in terms of how you validate your app. And then, hopefully, getting you to be able to submit your app so that you reduce the number of times you have to resubmit it, because that's never fun. But let's start off with, why do you validate your app? I mean, I think, that for some people who are creating add-ins, they may be primarily focused on enterprise deployments and they don't want to be in the store. And in that case, this may not be as relevant for you. But for anyone who wants to be able to market your add-in, there's really 2 ways that you can do that. And one is through the actual Office store itself, where I can actually get add-ins directly from the ribbon in any of the key Office apps like Excel or Outlook or Word. But there's also a store called AppSource that is designed for businesses to be able to actually get apps. And so there's a unified submission process to get to both of these stores. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So when you submit, you actually get into both stores. At the end of the day, the value is that you can actually be accessible within every single app all over the world, so that people can access the cool value that you're creating with your add-in. Now, similar to any other app store, we have policies and requirements. And so what we're going to be talking through today is some new ways that we've actually developed to really help you through this process, and also avoid some of the top failures that we have when we're trying to enforce some of those policies and requirements. And that's really the tough job that Mairead has with her team. We have a team of validators that are based not only in Dublin, but in Europe and in China. So we're working generally 24/7 at certain points of the day on trying to speed validation for you. And what I'm going to be showing you, and I'm going to put in the chat window a link to some new docs But what we want to do is talk through some new documentation and experiences that we've just launched. And you can see I've taken this link that's here in this slide, and I put it into the chat window. So if you guys want to follow along with me on this tour, I wanted to take the time to just kind of walk you through a couple of new kinds of documentation resources that we've put in place. So let me move over to my browser. Just one second here. We'll switch over to my browser here, and we'll be going directly to this. This is our new redesigned app validation documentation homepage. We've tried to really clean it up and make it very easy for you to understand the fundamental steps of what is the store, how does it work, and then we've added a completely new getting started section. And in particular, I want to highlight and walk through two new things that we've done. And these are based on presentations that we actually developed for Build last year. You may have been aware, we did a presentation where we walked people through a 30-minute 101 on how to validate your app and things to watch out for. And based on user feedback that we got from many customers like yourselves, we actually went in and we worked with the Partner Center team to change the user interface and reduce some of the complexity. It's still not I'll be honest, it's still a complex process to submit your app. And so part of this is to really give you a checklist to think about beforehand so that you're able to check your own work, if you will, ahead of time. And then the other thing that I'm going to show you is our step-by-step submission guide. So these two new resources in particular, I think, are important to bookmark this page if you can, so that you can remember to go to these, because this is going to really help you to, in a way, think of it as almost like a pre-flight checklist that a pilot would go through to check, if everything is properly operational and is on a path for success. So if we click here, you're going to see my MA Ready to Publish checklist. And just to walk you through this, what we'll have is steps that essentially you should be thinking about before you submit. So the first step would be to determine your launch timeline and just make sure that you're giving yourself adequate time from your first submission to final approval. Typically, on average, it takes sometimes 4 to 6 submissions before you actually get finally approved. Particularly if you've never done this before, it's new to you. A lot of times you're having to learn some of the peculiarities and nuances of how to get your app approved. It takes a little bit of time. So it's important, particularly if you have an important launch that you're going to be doing, to give yourself adequate time to submit your app and get it approved, and realize that you may have to go through several rounds before it actually gets submitted into the store. The other thing we want to highlight is the different app policies, and we have links to those policies here. It's important. Obviously, everyone on this call is interested in Office add-ins, but we also service other kinds of add-ins and apps, so we have those links here. Third, it's really important that you check your manifest compliance. We've got some great tools for self-testing your manifest that we link to here. So it's important to actually do that before you submit, because we also have an automated service that will check this as well. So you don't want to end up failing right out of the gate there. It's also important to highlight any platforms that you want to support and figure that out. If you're going to be also supporting Apple iOS, it's important that you have the correct information that's associated in your Partner Center profile so that you can do that submission. And then this is one of the steps that a lot of people get confused by, and that's about requiring additional purchases from third-party services. So if you're creating an add-in where you have a certain amount of value, but then you also have a service that you're selling on the back end that is required in order for them to really get the most out of the capability you're building, then it's really important that you check this box, and then you really need to follow through and make sure that Mairead's team has sample accounts, license keys, or any other test credentials, and that should be in the new UI for the Notes to Certification. I'll show that in a minute. Mairead, did you want to speak to this? I know that this has been one of the things that really drives a lot of errors for you and your team. Is there anything else that you would want to add here?
Yeah, I'll absolutely jump in on this. So as Michael said, folks, if your add-in needs a login to your service or to a different third-party service, and you don't provide that to my team in the notes for certification, that blocks our testing. We will literally have to down tool, stop, and say we cannot proceed, which means it gets rejected back to you. You've got another validation cycle. You've got to give us the info, come back in. So it's adding on to your own processing time the whole time. So think about it from the user perspective. If the user is going to need a login, if they're going to need some form of test data, anything like that, go ahead and give us in the notes for certification. You can't give us too much information there. It's simply not possible. So kill us with kindness, overload us with info, and my team will be delighted to get it.
There you go. And then this is another pain point that Mairead has helped to bludgeon onto the top of my forehead, which is critical information links that are required when you submit. So it's really important. This is one of the top 5 areas that people fail. And it's fairly simple to include, which is you want to have a URL to support for any kind of support for your add-in. You have to have a privacy policy and you have to have an end user license agreement. All of these are required. We've actually added in the interface now that there is a standard contract that you can choose as a software developer. You can choose a standard contract from our commercial marketplace if it's easier for you to use that. But you can also include your own EULA agreement here if you want to. But it's really important. These are, again, things that people sometimes pass over. We've tried to update the language to make it clear. It used to be a little bit more unclear, and we've actually said, this is legal and support information so that people understand that. And then we've added some validation to help ensure that you don't skip over this, because a lot of people would just skip over it, press submit, and we would allow that submission to go through and then have to reject it. So we've tried to improve things on our end to speed this process for you, but we want to just make it clear that this is a critical thing before you ever submit to make sure you have all these things pulled together. And we just reiterate on the support thing because it's something that many people miss. And then we also include some of the things that a privacy policy must include. Do you want to talk a little bit about this, Mairead? Because you can't just send us any web page, but we actually go to the web page when we're validating to see if it has this kind of information. You want to talk a little bit about what your team does there?
Yeah, absolutely. I can jump in here. So what my team are looking for on this privacy policy is we're not looking for a privacy policy that's about your own website. We're not looking for a privacy policy that's going to be about a different application or service you provide. What we're looking for is a privacy policy that either specifically names your add-in or else specifically defines the services that you as an organization or as a developer provide, and that definition includes your add-in. So if you send us something that is generic, and I'm going to use Microsoft or Contoso as an example here, if you sent us the privacy policy for Contoso.com, that is not going to pass. If you send us the privacy policy for Contoso.com where there's a definition within it that says this applies to all Contoso services, including Contoso for Outlook, Contoso for Word, that type of privacy policy will pass. So what we're really looking for is a reference to your add-in or a definition of services that includes your add-in.
Great. Awesome. Any questions related to this before we move on? Or if not, we will just continue to push forward. Finally, the most important step, obviously, for you to ensure that you can market your add-in appropriately to your customers is preparing the store listing for your team. So, this is an area where, you need to basically think about your app name, your short description of the app and its value, and then a long description of your app with HTML formatting. And one of the tips that we have is that you have your own HTML editor that you can use to create descriptions ahead of time. Because unfortunately, Partner Center doesn't allow you to have a what you see is what you get preview when you submit. And so you don't get to see what your submission looks like until after you've actually submitted it and it's been published. We are trying to work with them to improve this, but it's going to take time. So a lot of the customers we've talked to when we were going through this had said that what they like to do is use an HTML editor ahead of time to create it, and then you can paste that HTML right into those fields there. And you can see these are the fields. Sorry, I should have been showing you this while I was describing that, but these are the fields that you would be putting in here, and these support HTML here so that you can do HTML formatting. You also need to be able to put the right icon sizes in, and those are validated automatically if you don't have the correct icon sizes. But that is also a frequent area where people end up, failing. So these are some of the small little things that are really important. A lot of detail here in terms of, but the goal is for you to know all this before you ever submit so that you can pull all this together. Much like you're having to do your taxes, you got to pull all that information together and make sure you've got it so that you can hand it over for your submission. Then you can go to our step-by-step submission guide. And this is particularly handy if you've never done this before, or if you're training somebody new in your organization about how to do this. This is a great new resource we put into place in December. And we literally walk through every one of the screens in Partner Center to show you what you need to do here. And then you tell us about your product setup. We step through each of these screens. You upload your manifest for package testing. Again, this all aligns with all the prep work I just walked you through, but now it's showing you exactly how to do it and kind of helping to train you on how the Partner Center user experience works. In some cases, it's kind of wonky, and there's some places that I'll highlight. We are trying to work on improving the wonkiness of this, but it takes some time. And instead of waiting for them to make some of those changes, we've decided to make sure that you have a good user tutorial of what you need to be thinking about here. And then this is the different areas where you define your metadata. So we show you how that works. We talk about legal support information, your EULA, and then defining your languages. This is an area that can be very confusing. And just to be clear, while we support localized languages in the Office store, AppSource doesn't support localized languages. They only support English. And it's not very apparent, so we want to warn you about that because some partners have definitely been confused by that. And we are working with the AppSource team to try to get more parity with our Office stores. But they are kind of two separate stores. That said, when you want to create your first listing, this is a part that's, I think, a little bit counterintuitive. You have to actually pick a language first, and then 80 to 90% of the time that's going to be English, but you still have to pick the language that you're going to create your listing in, and you have to click on Manage Additional Languages to start that process, pick the language, and then you actually can go into creating your store listing. So that's some of the nuances of how you actually get your app into the store, and it's also important to decide on your availability date, and this is where, again, it's important to make sure that you give yourself time, particularly if you want to be able to control when this is available for any particular launch. You have to be able to put in the date here to do that. And then the most important step that we had talked about earlier that's in the Partner Center UX, this little red box now, we've actually added validation because a lot of people would just forget to put any notes for certification. And we've really tried to change the user experience here and put a lot more warnings in here that this is really important for you to add. Again, coming back to Mairead's point about if you do have any additional services that you require us to be able to validate to make sure your add-in works well, you need to be able to put those instructions right here in where this red box is. And that's usually the last step before you press publish. So now we validate that you've actually put something in and before we allow you to publish. And then the final thing that we always recommend is to just review that checklist again and make sure before you submit that you double check all these areas that we just talked about: terms of use, privacy policy, testing instructions, account and service disclosures. And once you've done that, then you're ready to submit. And if you do all the things that we've outlined, both in the checklist and in this guide, I think you have a very high chance of passing unless there's some technical issue. So with that, I'm not going to walk through the other things. I think this helps to sort of give you an overview. But with the time that's available, I wanted to make sure we address some of the questions that are in the chat if we haven't. Mairead, are there some questions that have popped in here that we might want to address with everyone, or are we getting them all resolved?
Yeah, we're working through them. Andros had a good one about whether you need to hit the checkbox when you're using a third-party service or just when it's your own service, and the answer was it's both. So if we're using Andros's awesome service, he's got to hit that checkbox, and if he's using a third-party service, he's still got to hit that checkbox. We want to be upfront with the end users.
Yes, great question.
Samira had a quick question about availability dates, asking us, is there a time limit, that it, does it have to go live within the next 3 months or whatever? The answer to that is no, but as Michael says, we do recommend, give yourself sufficient time. If you're targeting a specific launch date, come in. The earlier you come into us, the better it's going to be for everyone.
That's right. So if there aren't any other questions, I will hand back time because I know we have a pretty packed agenda, and Juan and the Outlook team are going to talk about some cool new stuff as well. I'm not going to walk through all the other slides I included, but there are different screenshots that are very similar to the documentation that I've just walked through. You're more than welcome to take a look at those slides if you want to when we provide that after the call. But I hope this makes the documentation, or I hope it makes the app validation submission experience a lot easier for you. Please let us know any feedback. I'm totally excited to get your feedback on this, and really appreciate the opportunity to show this to you. And I just want to once again thank you all for your support of our platform and all the things that you do to create exciting new value for our customers using Office. So, David, I will hand back control to you, or Juan.
Yeah, actually, Juan, if you're ready to go,
I'm ready.
Present your slides. Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Mairead. That's really fantastic information for everybody there. So, thank you very much.
Yes, this is awesome, Michael and Mairead. There's been a lot of improvements in the validation space, and it's all in you. Thank you so much. So now, folks, I'm so happy to be here today together with my colleague and friend Kwame. So you're going to get the PM and the engineer today talking to you. We want to give you an update on Outlook Addins, specifically event-driven Addins. And actually, I was kind of added late in the agenda for this call because I really cannot wait for the next month to show you this. Many of the things that we're going to talk about right now, you cannot try them immediately. The builds are right now rolling out. Within the next week, within the next couple of weeks, you're going to be able to play with this. So with that in mind, let's talk about event-driven add-ins. We have an update for that. So now, in case you don't know, the first thing that I want to discuss here is why do we need event-driven add-ins in Outlook? And I think the best way to show that is with a demo. So today, if you create an add-in for Outlook, and actually this is also true for Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, you actually, your add-in shows up in the ribbon, and then it's not until the user clicks on the button in the ribbon that you actually, get that actually your code is running. At this point, the task pane is activated. Your add-in can actually start interacting with the document through the JavaScript libraries and so on and so forth. So here you can add recipients, using the entire API, right? But there are some scenarios where, and we have a lot of events here. If you want to subscribe to the event, to when the user adds recipients, either on the 2 line, CC line, wherever, you can handle those events as long as your add-in is active. If your add-in is not active, so the minute I close the task pane, my code is basically thrown away, and I cannot run the code. So I cannot handle the events. I cannot do anything like that. Also, and there's a top request and overall for the Office platform to be able to support some sort of kind of a add-in that is running in the background, that it's able to work without necessarily having the user to explicitly activate the add-in through the ribbon, right? So that's where in the implementation for Outlook, we call this feature event-driven add-ins, because now as a developer, you can actually subscribe to a few events. And when those events happen, you can actually handle them with your add-in code. And one good example of this, one of the prime scenarios that we are kind of having a lot of excitement around is the signature add-ins. No? So check this out. When I click on creating a new email, I am in Windows right now. So we announced this feature in preview in Ignite back in November, but it was only working for Outlook on the web. The announcement that what I want to share with you is in the next couple of weeks, you will also have it working for Windows. So as you can see, I know that the add-in is working right now because in the notification bar, I have this message, right? So we have kind of a dog food add-in currently running. Our team is testing internally that you can actually add a signature to your email. So this pop-up here is handling an on-compose event. The add-in is subscribed, so every time the user creates a new email or creates a new appointment, we will trigger this event. You're going to be able as a developer to handle such event. And then, like, for example, this is an entry point to an add-in. Once I click on it, I'm able to basically configure the signature that I want to use internally. So we pre-populate your name, your email, your title, and then you can add a note, and you can also add, your pronouns if you want. So you can actually save it, and once you save it, you can kind of select the template you want to use for new emails or replies or or forwards. So for new email, I'm going to use template A, and then I'm going to use template C, and for the other ones. So when I click on save, basically my signature is it's kind of already defined, and then subsequently every time I create a new email, instead of getting that notification bar, I am actually going to see my signature inserted. Okay, so this is kind of the magic that you can do now. Now remember that for this we have a bunch of different types of scenarios, but in general the spirit of the feature is that you can do things like this. So the team is going to be investing in other types of events. I will share with you more details in a few seconds. But the pattern is this, So we're going to have events, and you're going to be able to run them in the background. So that is why we need event-driven add-ins. Hopefully that was clear for everybody. Now, again, this feature is about integrating your solution seamlessly in the Outlook experience. So basically, there is no user input needed. As I show you, the add-in can launch by themselves because you subscribe to the events that are occurring with Outlook. So it's basically the user using Outlook, as they use it every day, and then suddenly your add-in is also helping them to be more productive. One thing that you should know about event-driven add-ins is that there are UI-less in operation. So the add-in logic is launched through the events, and we don't have UI associated with them. And I will explain in a second why this is relevant and important. They are short running. So in Outlook, you will not have the add-in always running in the background for the entire time. Right now, they have a timeout of 5 minutes. So you have, for example, for the on-compose event, you'll have 5 minutes to do the logic you need to do. And then afterwards, we basically kill the sandbox. It's for compose mode. Right now, the event that we're going to release is composing emails or appointments. And then one thing that is important that you should know is that there's no UI disrupting API. So you cannot use the dialog, pop the dialog as part of these add-ins, and I will explain why in a second. Turns out that, I will explain that in the next slide. So these are the basics. It's about you integrating seamlessly in Outlook. And now where we are today, as shared previously, we launched the preview for Outlook on the web. Today, what I'm telling you is that in Outlook for Win32, we have a preview coming. So you install Insiders fast, and probably this week, you're going to get access to this build. So this build plus, you will get this feature working, right? So now what's special about Win32 that is different from Outlook on the web is that the feature is actually executed in a JS engine, in a chakra. We are not instantiating the full browser for it. We want to make it super optimized. So all this is running in a chakra JS engine. So that's why you cannot have like a page, you cannot pop a dialog or an HTML page around that. As you saw, the way that you can use to interact with your users, as I showed you previously on my demo, is that you will get a notification bar, and the notification bar, when you click on it, you can actually open a task pane, but at that point, that is not executing in the JS engine, all right? So basically, that's super important to know in the context of Win32. On the other hand, Outlook on the web is still using WebView, the WebView engine, and that's why what you're going to see on the manifest definitions, as Kwame is going to show in a few seconds, is that we are adding a new kind of runtime element to the manifest, where you can actually precisely specify the runtimes that you're going to be using. And in this case, you have the Outlook for the web, and specifically Outlook desktop runtime. So here's where you actually tell us where is the JavaScript file that is implementing the event handlers for your add-in. So basically a JavaScript file that includes all the methods that you need to expose to handle the events. All right. So I think Kwame is going to talk a little bit more about this. So I will just let him do the demo. But one last thing, this feature is actually using a JavaScript library that is shipped with Outlook. So it's not connecting to the CDN to download it. So basically what we are doing is that we are injecting a version of the JavaScript library that is going to be shipped within the product. So one of as a result of that, the engine doesn't call on ready. So this is an event that the platform calls, when it's loaded, basically, so you can start initializing your add-ins and stuff like that. So that is never called in these types of add-ins. You want to make sure that you are your own, and also you need to tell us. You need to use. We're going to publish these APIs, associate APIs, so that you can actually need to tell us, declare, that you're going to be using these events and what handlers. So with that, I think I'm going to switch to Kwame so that he shows you more details about how to do these types of add-ins. Kwame, if you're ready, please start sharing.
I think actually Juan covered pretty much everything that's necessary. So if you don't remember anything I'm going to say and you remember everything he said, you're fully covered. So specifically for what Juan demoed and for event-based add-ins, this is just a snapshot of the manifest that we are using. The key new element would be this runtimes blob. This is nothing new. It's also supported by Excel, but the main value of this runtimes blob is to make it easier to specify the endpoints for OA, which is the web client, and also for Rich Desktop Outlook, which is the native client. And so the way it works, hopefully this is not too confusing. This is the extension point for event-based add-ins. That's the name, launch event, and these are the specific events that we care about. So right now I only have one event, which is on new message compose. Then there is a function attribute. This is named function name, but it probably should be function key, but that's fine. Which means that whenever this event on new message compose, whenever you launch a new compose form, we will invoke a function that somehow points to this key, Thunder. And then this is where the runtimes comes into play. So you specify source location. There's a resource ID RTO or RT0, and this is the same as this. So we map this ID to this runtime ID, which means that you want this extension to use this runtime element. Now, by default, this RTO, you specify it here to point to an HTML file, mainly because OA will use a web view. And so OA will launch this HTML file. And then you add an override. And then if the client understands the override, in this case, Win32, that's Outlook, native client, understands this override. OA does not understand this override. So OA will simply just fall back to RT0. But Outlook understands this override. So we will actually use RT0 Win32, which points to purely this JavaScript file. And this JavaScript file, this is all we have in there, at least for my test case. This is the only code I have in there. And so this is the only code for my add-in. There is no HTML, as Juan said, for Win32. For OA, you can have some HTML in there. It's not necessary because you're not going to see anything. And this is all I have in here. So I have the function here, Thunder. But the key thing here is this is the key. So Thunder here must map to Thunder here. And then this function name must also map. Just to keep everything easy, you can make all of them the same. Then you know for sure they are all mapped. But if you want to go fancy, you can name this foo, and then this also has to be foo. And then this, as long as it maps to this, everything should work nicely. So when you run your add-in, when I run my add-in, for instance, I expect to, I'm just setting a signature. My signature is low tech and not as fancy as Juan's awesome signature. So all my signature is doing is saying hello Outlook.js injection. So once I click this, it will just insert hello Outlook.js injection in the body. The term JS injection here is a reference to how we built this feature. You realize that I don't have any reference to any CDN here. So then the question is, where is this coming from? Yeah, it is actually coming from the sandbox process that we are using to run the add-in. We've injected our Outlook JavaScript file into the sandbox. And so with any newer versions of Outlook that you install or when you upgrade, you get whatever latest JavaScript APIs that we've included. So you don't have to worry about the CDN specifically for the native client. OA still falls back to the old model because OA is still running in a web view, right? Still in the browser. So we can still leverage the old existing technology. So that's actually all I have. Danielle is also the head engineer on this feature. So she is on this call to keep me honest. Hope I haven't said anything inaccurate. Juan, I think that's all I have. So I can fall back to you unless there's anything you want me to talk about.
Thank you very much, Kwame. I think there are a couple of questions from the audience. Sam is asking us if there's a way for a function to access data that could be generated by the task pane. So basically, this is a very good question because it's talking about how can you kind of communicate between the code that is running in the JavaScript engine and the task pane, no? So you can actually open a task pane that it's actually in another browser running, no? So basically, what we are enabling, and this is an API that we are currently adding, that it's going to be a property bag that you can share between those two. It's going to be like a session level property bag, and that it's going to be alive for just in memory while the composing is going on. So basically, if you stop composing, if you close the inspector, that data is going to be basically released. No? So with that API, you can actually get and set a property bag that you can use among those two environments. Okay, so hopefully that answers the question. There's Samira, how are you? He's asking me when is Mac going to be available. So Mac, as you know, Mac is getting up to speed on supporting some of our previously shipped requirement sets. So right now the team is actually working on finishing 1.8 and 1.9. And we think that probably in the next half of the year, they're going to be able to actually give us a surprise and enable the event-driven add-ins. More on that later. Ibitikun, hey, what's up, man? He's asking us about the blog. The blog is going to be published later. Thank you for the interest. With all the details, how you can actually use this in your presentation. So Kwame and Danielle, thank you very much for showing us more details on the demo. Hopefully that was clear for everybody. It's kind of straightforward, no? There's another question in the call about if we have a list of the events that we will support. So that's a great question, actually, and I have a slide for it. In fact, the first we're planning to basically ship this feature as soon as we can, probably again during the month of January. The first event that we're going to release is the on compose event. So every time you create a new email or appointment, you will have that event. But we're going to be adding more, and here's where we need your help. If you can give us feedback about when or what events you would like to have. We are all ears here, so we would love to learn more. So we are going to planning in the next wave of events, we're going to have the recipients change. So imagine that every time you add or change recipients, you're going to trigger an event that you can use. For example, right now, during the pandemic and stuff like that, we have an internal solution that when you are recipients, we can actually learn by using the graph in what time zone those recipients are, and if they are, for example, out of working hours, which happens to be frequently because we work with a lot of folks that are actually in Bangalore. You can actually add a note in your email saying, hey, you don't need to look at this email right now. Do it whenever you're during office hours. No? So you can use that event to enable. I want you to think about all the scenarios that you can do here. No? So you add recipients. We have an internal add-in insights that it's actually going to be using a lot of different features based on this. For the signature scenario, for instance, when you want to stamp a signature in an email, depending if the recipient is internal or external, depending if the user is external or internal, you can actually provide a different signature. So that's why we find that event very useful. The other event that we are planning to add is an attachments change. So every time you add an attachment, we're going to trigger the event. And think about there are thousands of different scenarios you can use here. But for example, let's say I want to optimize resources here, and if someone attaches a really big attachment, I want to suggest to, instead of adding an attachment, provide a link to a OneDrive, for instance, right? Or you want to validate that the attachments that people are adding are safe to share and stuff like that. And then we have appointment change. So every time when you're creating an appointment and you either change the time or you change the recurrence, we actually want to have an event, and this is useful for, again, many types of different scenarios, collaborating across time zones, finding the best time to meet among all the recipients based on the timing. So these are the list of events that we're planning to add. And we also have, as you saw in my demo, we're going to pop an info bar, which is remember that when I was creating an email the first time, it was like, hey, you don't have a signature, you want to create it. And when I click on that button, that we call that the info bar, the actionable info bar. So we are also going to get an event when users actually dismiss that. So when the user clicks dismiss on that info bar, you're also going to get an event for this. All right. So I think that's everything that I have right now. I'm not sure if there are other questions, but if not, then we're ready to move to the next topic, I guess.
Okay. Cool. Thank you, Juan. Yeah, it's really great demo, really great information. Very cool.
Yeah, thank you. By the way, I forgot to mention something important. There's another event that we're actually moving to this engine, which is the on-send event, because people are asking here when an email is sent. So we're also going to have an on-send event running on the JS engine runtime. So sorry, I forgot to mention that.
Okay, thank you. So want to move on to our community spotlight for the month. Send out a big thank you to Hiroshi Yoshioka, as well as Martin van Stam for community contributions they've been making on the PNP repo. These are contributions like helping out with reviewing issues or PRs or submitting PRs. So it's really great that you're helping out, and we definitely appreciate that. And if I will include in the blog post summary these links that are on the slide. If you want to follow Hiroshi with his GitHub ID link there, or the Twitter feed for Martin. If you want to help us out and also appear on the community spotlight with a mention, you can also participate. We have some repos here. We can help we have Office.js docs PR, which is our documentation repo, where you can help us with making doc updates if you want to fix things or add new things. We also have PNP Office Addins, which is where all of our PNP samples are at, and also the Office.js repo, where we track our issues across the product platform. Let's see, moving on to Q&A, and there's this is kind of an overload slide. So folks can submit questions on a form that we have, which I'll provide a link to later. These are the questions that came in over the last month, and I got to some of these. There's a few I don't quite have answers yet, just because of the break and stuff, and trying to reach out to folks. But here's what we have for today. So first question is, what is the most effective way to debug executable add-ins for Outlook? I saw a video that seemed to mention sideloading for Outlook was on the way, but I couldn't find an exact date or date range. So yeah, this was a demo that Courtney did back in November on the call, where he showed how to debug slide loading into Outlook. That feature just went to GA last week, so you should see it appear any day, basically. Basically, it's out, so you can take advantage of that. Next question is the requirement that all add-ins be compatible with IE11 as a killer. It's just too much of a rework to impose on our tiny team, and I suspect other teams. In order to meet the min bar for acceptance into the marketplace, IE11 is a platform MSFT itself is moving on from. As far as I can tell, market share has dropped 1.2% or so. Is there any way we can work around this requirement so that our add-in can make it into the marketplace? Yeah, that's a good question. So one thing I'll point out is, for the IE11 requirement, it's there because, like, for example, the shared runtime, if you're using that, and that's an Excel desktop on Windows, it will load IE11 right now. And as there's been some presentations on the call recently where we've talked about WebView 2 coming out in the future, that will replace IE11 at some point, which will make this less likely. I don't know if that will completely remove the requirement, so I'm still reaching out to the team for some more information there. But in the meantime, I mean, if you're having, like I know it's a lot of work, I would definitely recommend using a transpiler, such as like if you write in TypeScript, that'll transpile back to the ECMAScript for I11, or you can use Babel polyfill, and that will definitely help. It doesn't solve every issue because there, some things I11 just doesn't support, but it will definitely help so you don't have to write your code sort of archaically, I guess. Anyway, if I can find out more information there from the team, I'll include that in the blog post. And the next question is, we are enthusiastic about the new event-based activation combined with the insight message notification with a custom action. This is currently available in preview and Outlook on the web, and we're hoping to have it available in the new 2.0 requirement set. Could you please give us an estimation when this is planned to be available for Outlook on Windows clients? So yeah, Juan was just speaking to that in his demo. So that's still, I would guess, Juan, we don't really have a specific date yet. It's kind of tricky with, I call these like roadmap questions, like when's this going to be available? And they're always kind of squishy because we don't always have an exact date. I mean, we want to be as specific as we can, but at the same time, we're gathering feedback on these. Oh, sorry, Juan, were you going to?
Yes, we need your help to release it as soon as possible. Right now we are finishing the feature. It's in preview. It's going to be in preview in Win32 very quickly, and the sooner we get more use on this and people, right now it's about feeling that we are shipping a solid product. So obviously we think that we reached that state, but we need obviously our community to help us drive the quality. So our goal is to release it during the first quarter of this year, more aggressively early in January, but that's aspirational goal right now.
Okay, thank you, Juan. And just a couple more questions. So we have for EWS and the REST API usage, Office.js provided the get callback token async to get an authorized token for making EWS or REST API calls. With the push towards the Graph API, can a version of this method to authenticate with Graph be provided, i.e. that requires only to install the add-in and then perform this call through Office.js rather than needing to perform additional external setup and get access token is not equivalent to this? Yeah, so this is one I'm reached out to the team on. I don't have an answer today on this, and we'll let you know in the blog post. And then last question, someone mentioned that in the user voice platform, Lily and Lou said that GA is expected in the next few months for the PowerPoint API. Is there a clear date for that? And also on that one, I'm still reaching out to the team to see if I can get more specific information. And just kind of echoing what Juan said, like we try to let these features bake, so to speak. Like we like to get feedback. We want to make sure they're stable, and so it's it's kind of hard to predict a very exact date with that. So we tend to have squishy projections on these, but I'll include what I can from the team in the blog summary after the call. So moving along, if you want to engage with us, you can go to this Office Addins Engage AKA link where there's a form you can fill out, and if you're interested in presenting on the call, if you have something interesting to share with fellow developers on Office Addins, let us know and we can get in touch with you and put together a presentation. So just reach out and let us know. If you are new to Office Addins, here's some links and information for getting started. We, of course, have our Office Addins docs at that AKA MS link at the top there. There's 5-minute quick starts where you can just get up and running in 5 minutes just to see how it works on each of the different hosts there, from Excel to Outlook and so on. And also, if you're interested in just automating Excel tasks, you can go check out Office Scripts at the aka.ms/Office Scripts docs. In addition, we have developer resources to help you with your development. The Microsoft 365 Developer Program. These are all the links to get these things. Highly recommended to get that because that gives you a free tenant so that you can develop and test your Office add-ins. It's very useful. You can also go try out Script Lab, where we have lots of small code samples that you could run without requiring a full development setup. So you can just run these straight in Excel, which is kind of cool. It's a nice way to try it out. Also, our Office add-ins documentation, as well as a link to custom functions documentation. And if you want to engage with us, if you have questions or you spot product issues, you can go to these links on Stack Overflow for questions. Here's a list of tags you can use for Office.js and Outlook web add-ins and Office scripts. If you spot what appears to be a bug, let us know at the Office.js repo on GitHub. And if you have a feature request or suggestion you'd like to see implemented and developed, go to our user voice site there. And of course, you can always send a smile or frown from inside Office itself about various features. And of course, this isn't our only monthly community call. We also have other Microsoft 365 developer community calls around adaptive cards, Microsoft Graph, and SharePoint. So if you're interested in any of these areas, please go check them out. And then the link at the bottom here will take you to the entire list of all of our calls. So just to wrap up, thank you, everyone. We'll post a recording in a few days of today's community call. And there's a link to it to the channel there on YouTube. You can also follow us on Twitter at Microsoft 365 Dev. The next call will be February 10th at 8 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And if you don't have an invite to the call on your calendar, you can go to the AKAMS link there and get it. You can also let us know if you have any questions on the Office Addins form link at the very bottom there. So with that, we'll wrap up, and I'll just say thank you, everyone, and we will see you on the next call.